Today is going to be a lot of fun, primarily because in this class, we're talking about baptism and we're talking about wilderness, okay? We're talking about baptism and wilderness, and those two elements are super important in our own experience, okay? Because what wilderness represents is it represents the experience of being in a pre-resurrection state, in a pre-new heavens and new earth state. It represents being in a circumstance in which you are waiting for something for the future. You've been brought out of something, but you haven't been totally brought to something. And so the idea of waiting for the future while still in the present being liberated from the past, that's what the wilderness era represents for Israel, okay? And if that sounds complicated, we'll break it down more. I wanted to also, can you guys see this okay? Okay. I wanted to also say, so in this class, we have after this week, we have 3 more weeks in the Torah. What is the Torah? The Torah is the first major section of the text of the Bible, and you might know it as Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. Okay, so Genesis to Deuteronomy is a major section of the Bible. And in 4 weeks, including this week, so after this, we will be done, okay, with that section. We spent a lot of time in Genesis. We spent I believe, maybe 12 weeks. No, more than that. Like 15 weeks in Genesis, okay? Now we're 3 weeks into Exodus, right? And in 3 weeks we'll be done. Particularly because we're not spending too much time on the Levitical laws. We're going to do 1 week just on going in the book of Leviticus, 1 week in Numbers, and 1 week in Deuteronomy. So we have this week and next week, and that's the end of Exodus. Then we have 1 week in Leviticus, 1 week in Numbers, 1 week in Deuteronomy, and then we're done with the Torah. Congratulations. You will have made it through your first major, you will have made it through the T in Tanakh. So Tanakh is the Old Testament. It's Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, Tanakh, T and K, okay? And you will have made it through the T, okay? The law, the Pentateuch. When the New Testament refers to the law, it's most often referring to the 5 books of Moses, okay? So, after that, something else is we'll get into the N in Tanakh, the Nevi'im, the prophets, and that's the second major Tanakh section. And it's broken up, if I haven't already said it, it's broken up in that way because by the New Testament era, you had all of the collections of the prophetic writings of Israel broken up into, like I said, a major scroll or like a major section of writings called the prophets, called the Torah, and then the writings. When we get to Joshua, after Deuteronomy, is when we'll be in that second major section. And when we get there, I want to do some fun stuff. That first meeting, we're going to just focus just on the land of Israel because we had not been talking about it very much. And so I wanted to maybe have a guest come in and speak on that with me. And I also wanted you guys to get some of the smells and flavors of the land of Israel. And so I thought we could bring in what's called the 7 species of Israel. It's the 7 naturally growing produce that comes out of the land. So dates and figs and what else? Grapes, things like that. Okay. So I don't know. I thought that would be fun. We can line this table and then we can do, yeah. So, and then I could bring some prints of some photos from the Israel trip, and then the slides again, as Joshua and the Israelites are going into that promised land. That whole meeting is just going to be about the promised land. Okay. Does that make sense? So I thought that would be fun, a fun little way to break up sort of the daily stuff, and yeah, we could all try some good food, and I'd like to have someone come in and talk more about it as well. Does that sound good, guys? So I want to just lay that roadmap out for you about where we are going, as today we are still in Exodus. What are some thoughts from last week? Everyone digest last week, okay? We talked about the plagues and the Passover. We talked about Pharaoh, plagues, and Passover. 3 P's. Okay? And we talked about what the plagues mean in their context. And we talked about how they are signs and wonders most of all. They're trying to tell us something about the Most High God, or God is telling us something through those signs, right? And then we talked about Passover. I'm going to go through these recap slides a little bit. Remember, the Israelites are enslaved in Egypt. They've been enslaved. They've been living in Egypt for 400 years. God has now called them out through his prophet, Moses. He called his prophet Moses, the man of God, out of Egypt. He was in the royal court of Egypt into the wilderness. Moses lived in the wilderness. God met him there on Mount Sinai. And then he says, I want you to do the same for your people, essentially. You know, he's the sort of a microcosm of what's going to happen for everyone. Bring them out of the land of Egypt through the wilderness and to the mountain of Sinai, where I will meet you. And you can come and we are going to have a covenant. We're going to have a relationship established between the people that now come from the older figure, which was Abraham, right? So Abraham was met by God that he would have generations come from him and he would become a great nation, and that great nation would be representing God to the rest of the world. And then now that nation has come into existence, but they're in bondage in Egypt. And so the idea here is that now they're coming out, they're going through the wilderness to Mount Sinai, and there they will establish relationship with the Most High. Why all of that? Remember, going back to the Genesis 11, the scattering of the nations, the selection of one out of the nations in whom the rest of the nations will be blessed. I don't have those slides here, but the one where it's, you see the nation scattered and then Abraham come out and then they come back in. So the salvation plan is coming to effect, as God will say to the people of Israel as they come to Sinai. He says, you are to be a kingdom of priests and a light to the nations. Okay, so the concept here is that God, in creating a people who he can have a direct relationship with after that fall, back in the first chapters of Genesis, God is restoring to himself relationship with humanity. Now, I said Moses is the prophet of God. This means he is the mouthpiece. He is the one representing God to the people. Not necessarily in a priestly fashion. Priests do that ceremonially speaking. A prophet does that directly through messages, through specific messages and prophecies as they are given to the prophet and then to the people. Now, one of the primary prophecies given by Moses is that Moses told Pharaoh what was going to happen at the end of this series of plagues. This great, horrible situation in which the firstborn are going to be slain, right? That this is going to be the act of judgment against the people of Egypt. But what he was able to do is give a way in which the Israelites are going to be spared. God provides a means by which, judgment is coming, but for the people of God who are listening to the prophet of God, listening to the voice of God, there's a means and a way by which we are able to be protected through this judgment, okay? The way that happens is they take the blood of a spotless lamb and they paint it on their doorpost so that the angel of death, when it comes and sees, it protects instead of destroys, okay? Now, why is this important? The reality of the later prophets talking about the great judgment of God that's coming upon not just Egypt, but upon the whole world, right? That God is going to come and have his justice. He's going to come and he's going to reap his vengeance upon the world for the evil of the world, right? The question is, how is he going to save humanity through that judgment? How is anyone going to be left and able to stand? It's the same mechanism by which Israel was able to survive in the judgment of Egypt. It is the same mechanism by which humanity is able to survive the judgment of the coming of God into the world at the end of time. And what is that mechanism? What is the mechanism by which they're saved? Okay, yeah, the blood of the spotless lamb, right? Yeah, remember, why is the lamb spotless? The lamb is spotless because it represents God. It represents God's identity as being spotless, as being perfect, right? And Jesus, of course, being a sinless, spotless lamb led to slaughter. And the idea is that this is imagery that goes all the way into Revelation. There's the great day of the Lord is coming upon the world, and there's this great cry of who is able to stand at his coming, right? Who is not essentially flattened onto the ground at his coming, who is able to stand. And then John says he sees the 144,000, those who have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb, right? So the idea of being covered in the blood, covered by the blood. This is the Passover imagery, okay? And the point here is that when you're reading the story of Israel, I asked last week, why is this a perpetual holiday that we celebrate, Jews and Christians alike? And someone said it's because their story is our story. Okay, remember, while this event of the Exodus is an event for a specific people at a specific time in history, the motifs of it, the themes of it, and you can really see it as allegory for the entire reality of existence, that we and all of creation are held in bondage to decay, bondage to sin and slavery of sin, that things go wrong, and there's an answer for why that is all the way back in Genesis chapter 3. The world was originally created good, but the pinnacle of that creation, the humans, rebelled, and it threw the world into chaos, right? That's Genesis 3 to 11. So now the whole world is in bondage to sin and decay, okay, and death. How are we to be liberated? How is the creation to be liberated? It is to be liberated in that God is bringing judgment upon the world of sin and death, but he's reserving for himself a people that are spared through a mechanism. That mechanism is God's own life force being shed, being given for the people, right? That God essentially gives of himself in order to restore a people undeserving. Okay? That is the story of the Bible, and that's the Exodus. Okay? That's what we just saw in the Exodus. Is the slaying of the Passover lamb means that the judgment of God upon Egypt passes over, right? It passes over the people of Israel in that they are able to stand in the judgment. Does that make sense, guys? Are you seeing what is the importance of that? And remember, with that is the importance of understanding what the word redeem means, okay? The word redemption means that there was a payment that was made, right? It doesn't mean that you just sort of reconcile yourself out of your own merit. It means that someone came and they paid for you in order to be redeemed, that there was an actual exchange that happened, right? And so what was paid is, again, God gave of himself. He sacrificed himself. That's true of the Passover, because remember, the lamb represents God. The lamb represents the shedding of God's own life, the shedding of God's own blood on behalf of the people. Okay, does that make sense, guys? So that's our recap. Now that we have gone through the story of the Passover, now they are liberated. Now Pharaoh is telling them, you're free to go. Okay? The judgment has been so great upon Egypt through these plagues, through these signs and wonders, that finally Pharaoh relents. I find it very interesting that, Pharaoh's heart was hardened all the way up into the point at which you have the perfect and most poignant and most important image for what it means for Christ to die for you. Okay. Christ is called the Lamb time and time and time again, right? And I just think that the story of the plagues, they lead up to that point, and then it's over, right? Now they're gone. Of course, there's one more big event that still needs to happen. Remember, the 10 plagues are actually 12 signs. The final of which, the true final of which, is the parting of the Red Sea. Okay, so we're going to talk through the parting of the Red Sea. How's everyone feeling? That was my quick little recap. So, is everyone getting it? Is everyone lost? No? No one's lost? Hopefully you're seeing how the Bible, can be very confusing unless you see sort of the whole thing, right? Unless you see the sort of the forest, right? And then the trees start to make sense once you see the forest, essentially, and understand that it is telling a story through history, but oftentimes it's telling different iterations of the same story over and over again. Okay.
Can I mention one thing?
Yep.
About the signs that I thought was really interesting? Is that like 4 signs in at the gnats, the Pharaoh's spiritual advisors, so to speak, they could not duplicate it. And he said, "This is the finger of God."
Mm-hmm.
So he got hardened spiritually,
Mm-hmm.
even though the spiritual people were telling him,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's something here that is
Yeah.
better.
That's an interesting
then
point.
a few more plagues in, the locust, I think it was, said his official, so politically.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And then political abandonment of support.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that order, it went spiritual first, then political, the human beings.
Right.
And he was still hard.
Yeah.
At that point. So
it might have been good for us to read through. We just only have so much time. Yeah.
And his notes got in the reading.
Yeah. That's good. And that's why it's good for you guys to do the reading on your own time, because we don't read it through everything. But
how
meaningful
that pattern is, that there's a spiritual hardening.
Yeah.
And then there's even a humanity or
right. People around. Yeah. That's good. Okay. So we're going to talk through the parting of the Red Sea. I want to redirect your attention to this main image that I have. This is my parting of the Red Sea image. It's the base image, branded image for the deep end. And the reason I chose, I think, this for the main branded image of this study is, number one, the deep end, right? So going into the waters, right, is the idea. You go into the deep end of the waters. But number two, because this story is very important, as you brought up from the podcast, simply because it's so incredible how what the Bible does is it gives you all of these different symbols for understanding what it means to be spiritually revived, right? So one of those symbols is that God's judgment no longer comes upon you, that you don't have to be afraid of it. You have the blood on your door. That's one way of looking at being spiritually revived, right? Another way of thinking about it is the idea that God made a way for you to pass through, or you could say be protected in a place that you should have no right or ability to be in. Okay. And that is the image of the waters, right? That God himself is making a way for you. Okay. That's another way of thinking about being spiritually revived, and starting at one point and ending at another point, that once they come through, now they have been born as the people of Israel. You brought up, like, in the very first meeting of the deep end, the idea of in our mother's womb, there's a waters there, right? And you have to go through an experience to actually come into the world, right? And so, ancient people thought about that, and they thought about the idea that all of the land is surrounded by water. So the whole earth came out of a primordial womb, that is the waters, right? And what does it mean for me to be able to pass through waters and come out on the other side? It's kind of like me undergoing a new birth, being born again. I'm undergoing an experience that resembles the experience of the creation, being born out of a primordial womb. And me, as I'm born of my mother's womb, I'm now going through that process again, right? I'm able to shed the dead weight of my past. I'm able to shed the dead weight of slavery and come through to the other side. And what the text says is that it's not just I, but everyone around me that gets to go through that experience. And not just I and everyone around me, but the whole world eventually goes through that experience. You see what I'm saying? That the world itself is going through this cycle of birth, but it died and now it's going to be reborn again. Okay? Does that make sense? And that is essentially what the Bible is trying to tell you, okay? Is that God has made a way for you to go through, okay? Um, so, and come out on the other side and not be caught in the waters. Remember, the Egyptians, their firstborn are slain. Also, the Egyptians, they chase after the Israelites, and then they are thrown into the sea, right? They don't pass through the sea, they're thrown into the sea. It's because they're against God, they're against the people of God, and so they undergo that final judgment. But the idea is that if you follow after the one who's leading you through those waters, the one who covered you by his blood, through the blood of the lamb, then you'll make it to the other side. Okay? So these images are speaking to spiritual realities, of course, but so let's get into the reading, okay?
Except everybody's all nice and warm when they're inside their mother's womb, and then it's like,
Yeah, okay, that's right. Yeah, well, and yeah, that's a good point. But I think the ordeal of being born, the ordeal of childbirth, yeah, it is an ordeal, and so is the ordeal of the parting Red Sea, and so is the ordeal of baptism. So let's go ahead and read this. I'm just going to read through the full chapter, and then we will go back to the slides, okay? Then Yahweh said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to turn back and camp in front of Haithroth, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal Zephon. You shall camp opposite by the sea. Pharaoh will say to the Israelites, they are wandering aimlessly in the land. The wilderness has closed in on them. I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, so that I will gain glory for myself over Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians shall know that I am Yahweh." They did so. Pause. So in the chapter before this, which we have not read, it says, it basically addresses the question that you might have: why didn't they just go straight to the promised land when they could, if they just go up the coastline of the Mediterranean? And the answer is, number one, the goal is that they're brought through the wilderness to Sinai first. They go through periods of testing before they're brought into the promised land. Number two, it says distinctly within that passage, within the previous chapter, chapter 13, it says that God perceived that, or he knew that they would be attacked. They weren't ready to go to battle with the Canaanites, essentially. So he has to take them by another road, but the road that he takes them leads them to another coastline. How are they able to get through, right? So why are we going to the sea, essentially? And that's another reason it's giving, is to provoke Pharaoh, essentially, because I'm about to show my glory through the judgment that I'm going to bring upon the Egyptians as I lead you through the waters, okay? So when the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the minds of Pharaoh and his officials were changed toward the people, and they said, "What have we done letting Israel leave our service?" So he had his chariot made ready. He took his army with him. He took 600 picked chariots and all the other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the Israelites, who were going out boldly. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, his chariot drivers and his army. They overtook them, camped by the sea. As Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites looked back, and there were Egyptians advancing on them. In great fear, the Israelites cried out to Yahweh. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not the very thing we told you in Egypt? Let us go alone. Let us alone, and let us serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." But Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid, stand firm, and see the deliverance that the Lord will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. Yahweh will fight for you. You only have to keep still." Okay, so pause there. This is going to start a repetitive pattern. Um, the first among many complaints of the Israelites in the wilderness, right? We'll speak a little bit more to that, but I just want you to take note of that. The sense in which they think we've been duped, they're going to think that multiple times. This God must be a trickster to lead us out into the wilderness to die, bringing us out of slavery, that sort of idea. And yeah, we'll talk more about it when we see a bit more of that today. Okay. Okay, picking up right after he says, "You only have to keep still." It says, "Then Yahweh said to Moses, why do you cry out to me? Tell the Israelites to go forward, but lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the Israelites may go into the sea on dry ground. Then I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, so that I will gain glory for myself over Pharaoh and all his army, his chariots and his chariot drivers. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, Yahweh, when I have gained glory for myself over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his chariot drivers. The angel of God who was going before the Israelite army moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from in front of them and took its place behind them. We have not talked about the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire just yet. We sort of skipped over a passage talking about that, but essentially you have to think about the fact that as they're being led out, God is leading them out through two things that they're seeing in the sky. Number one is said to be a pillar of cloud. Okay. So this great, you could say monolith, this great skyscraper on the earth, that is this cloud that is leading them forward. And then at night, that is a pillar of fire. Okay. So the cloud is by day, providing shade, and the fire is by night, providing light. Okay. A lot to be said there. We'll talk about that in a moment. Okay. But that now that pillar of fire and cloud has gone behind them, and now the sea is on the front of them. Okay. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. Yahweh drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night and turned the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. The Israelites went into the sea on dry ground, the waters forming a wall on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went into the sea after them. All of Pharaoh's all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and chariot drivers. At the morning watch, the Lord in the pillar of fire and pillar of cloud looked down upon the Egyptian army and threw the Egyptian army into a panic. He clogged their chariot wheels so that they turned with difficulty. The Egyptians said, "Let us flee from the Israelites, for the Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Then Yahweh said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots and their chariot drivers." So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at dawn the sea returned to its normal depth. As the Egyptians fled before it, the Lord tossed the Egyptians into the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the chariot drivers. The entire army of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea, not one of them remained. But the Israelites walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great work that Yahweh did against the Egyptians. So the people feared Yahweh and believed in Yahweh and in his servant Moses. Okay, we'll stop there and just talk about this in the slides for a few minutes before we continue. Okay, thoughts? Parting of the Red Sea, famous story. We're not done with it yet. We have another chapter to read on it, but yeah, what are your thoughts? Brenda?
I just want to ask you, so verse 21, when it says Moses stretched out his hand from the sea, and all the night the Lord drove the sea back. So was that at nighttime?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's what it's being described is even to think that the process might have been longer than just the instantaneous example that we see in, the Ten Commandments movie or the Prince of Egypt, right? The idea of more of a prolonged process because it says all night the wind was driving this sea back. So that's a good question. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. And so my first question was Sea of Reeds.
Yeah. Okay. Sea of Reeds versus Sea of Red Sea. Yeah. So
I asked that because in the podcast we listened to,
Mhm.
it was referred to as Sea of Reeds.
Mm-hmm. Why is that? Interesting question, right? So there is a how do you put it? There's a way of talking about it in the Hebrew that makes it sort of ambiguous as to what body of water this is actually talking about, because it can rightly be translated Sea of Reeds or the Reed Sea as opposed to the Red Sea, which is kind of ironic because they both have R's and end in D's and have an E in the middle. Just one is one extra E. But anyway, so the question is, what is the body of water that was crossed? And is it the same body of water that we think of when we think of the Red Sea, right? So there's two gulfs in the Red Sea. We'll talk through this in a second, but that are like the proposed options. But then some people will say, well, no, it could be at this other spot. So I'm not really pinned down either way on where.
Well,
Yeah.
what makes a difference is, I guess, is liberal theologians
Mm.
think it's the Reed Sea, which is up near the delta of the Nile,
Mm-hmm.
which is shallow waters.
Right.
So wouldn't have been so miraculous. That,
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to drown in it, in other words.
Right. Yeah, I've heard this a lot. I have not looked too deeply into it. I'll just say. So, sorry.
Certainly has to be deep enough.
Yeah.
Whatever word.
Mm-hmm. Has to be deep enough for them to drown, and it has to be, yeah. It's presented well because the Jordan is split too when they cross into the land, and that's a repetitive, like a miniature repetition of what's going on here. And if they're rivers that are essentially comparable in size, then I think that would be kind of weird. That's just my opinion, though. Any other thoughts, Brenda?
I just thought it was very, very neat how it says verse 25 how God jammed the wheels.
Yeah. So, what's interesting about that for you?
It's just how he made provision.
Yeah, right. Okay, so there's a number of different. He threw them into a panic. He jammed their wheels, and then he threw them into the sea. Why is it significant that he jammed their wheels? Well, chariots themselves are a specific thing that are described in the Bible, oftentimes referring to the sort of like might of the industrial military complex, you could say. So the idea here is that chariots represent technology, and they represent sort of the might of kingdoms, right? That if you're a mighty kingdom, you have chariots. So for the Lord to disrupt the chariots, it's a big deal. That's why they're mentioned so many times. It's like you're supposed to get this image of if you have chariots, you're a big deal. Like you've got technology, you've got a really, really excellent fighting force, as opposed to just, an army. You've got chariots. Oh, wow. And so the idea here is that, the Lord throwing all of this might and all of this technology into the waters, he is bringing down a mighty nation, right? So let's talk about the pillar of cloud and fire for a second. The Lord appears as a pillar of cloud and fire through this wilderness wanderings. What do you think about that? Like, what is interesting about the pillar of cloud and fire? That again, during the day, in one instance, there's this great big cloud, and then at night there's this fire. And have we seen similar imagery in the past of the Lord appearing as, you could say, a cloud and a fire?
The burning bush.
Okay, the Lord appears in the fire of the burning bush. Good, good. So our Lord is a consuming fire, as it says in Deuteronomy. But there's the cloud. We have talked a little bit about this before. Remember when Abraham cuts a covenant with God, when he slices a bunch of animals in two and puts them on the right and on the left? What does it say passes through in that covenant? Passes through the pieces. Essentially billowing smoke and a flaming torch. Okay. So remember, we talked a little bit about this back then. Okay. About what does it mean for this covenant? You have the pillar of, you have fire and smoke passing through the pieces. So that was sort of a proto image of the pillar of cloud and fire. And all the way back then, I talked a little bit about that. But number one, let's say the basic concept of the pillar of the cloud and then the pillar of the fire, again, is by day, shade from the sun. By night, light for the path, so that they may walk in the night. Try and think deeply about this and about God. He's revealing himself as these images, cloud by day and fire by night. What's significant about that?
I thought it was when he moved the cloud, like he moved it in front of them at one time, and then he moved it in back of them.
Sure.
And then he did it to confuse Pharaoh now, so they wouldn't see the Israelites.
Yeah.
To protect them.
Yeah. But as these images, you're in the desert and God is a cloud, right?
Yeah.
and then you're in the night and God is a light. Okay? So it's very, very simple demonstration of what will be God's provision at every moment. Okay? Every necessary moment. The simplest way you can put it is the cloud by day, right? That you need protection from this sun, or else the sun's going to kill you, and you need protection from the night, or else you don't know where to go. Okay? Now he's going to show up again and again and again and again and again and again, right? There will be moments where if he hadn't shown up in this way, they'd be gone. They'd be dead. They'd be done for. But he gives them exactly what they need. And the simplest demonstration of that is cloud by day, fire by night. That's going to be demonstrated again in the manna story. It's going to be demonstrated again in the water story. All these moments in which God is very simply giving and showing up as the thing necessary for their wilderness wanderings. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even simpler.
Mm-hmm.
He's the invisible God
Mm-hmm.
who's making himself.
Yeah.
He's revealing its revelation.
There's
Here I
yeah.
am, follow me.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. Yeah, that's probably the simplest way to put it. Yeah. 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 That's good. Here's how you can see me and know where to go. Okay? Sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah. Do you think Moses is seeing this through his spiritual eyes, or everyone could see this cloud? Like by day and fire by night. So everybody probably thinks Moses is crazy.
That's a really good question. I could not say. Yeah, I could not say that. I think the Egyptians seem to see the same pillar of cloud and fire, so I don't know. And they do see when God comes down in the flaming cloud at Mount Sinai. The Israelites do see that. But it is one of those situations that Moses is being spoken directly to at times in way, or most of the time Moses is being spoken directly to, and then the Israelites do think this man is out to get us, right? Like we're following a madman into the wilderness. And I just want you to, as we get into these complaint stories, I want you to resonate a little bit with the Israelites, okay? Remember I showed you that video, and in the recording, I'll put it back up. That video that my dad took when they were in Jordan last 2 weeks ago of the wilderness, okay? The wilderness where Israel wandered, and how there's nothing out there, okay? So imagine you're a nation, you're part of a nation, and these people, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, decide that, you know what, we're going to be your leaders. We're going to get it so that you can be out of slavery, and we're going to go this way. And you're going into the Mojave. Okay? Imagine that, right? Yeah. You're like, are you turning around? Okay, you're walking this way. If you've ever driven to the Mojave, you're walking where there's nothing.
Doesn't seem like a good idea.
Right. And you're like, should I be doing this right now? I'm following a madman into the wilderness where I'm going to die. And I guess the point here is we sort of, shake our heads. Those dang Israelites. They don't trust in Yahweh. Yeah, it's us, guys. I mean, come on. Like, we are those people, and it makes sense. Okay? That's sort of the point. Okay? We'll talk more about this, but yeah. Yeah.
It seemed like their faith too kind of went back and forth.
It does go back and forth, right?
Yeah, it's like when God do something great for them, they're like, "Oh, let's praise Him, and then."
Well, it's the idea, okay, you brought me this far, but do I trust you in the next thing? Do I trust you in the next thing?
Yeah, they kept complaining.
Right. But then they get moments of deliverance and they're like, oh, it's good. But again, it's sort of a skepticism. Inborn in it is a skepticism about God that says, well, maybe he's just playing with me. He's yanking my chain, right? He gives me good things only to a point, and then he'll let me fall, And so that's sort of how they're thinking about it, right?
I think that pertains to us even now.
Absolutely. That's the point that I'm trying to get at. Yeah.
That when we go through our tests and trials, we're supposed to still give God glory. Give him honor
Right.
and praise.
Yeah. Okay, so you brought it up. This is just to recap a little bit. You brought it up, where are they passing through? There's the Gulf of Aqaba, and then the Gulf of Suez. This is the Suez Gulf, and then this is the Gulf of Aqaba. And the question is, do they pass through this way, or are they passing through the Reed Sea or something like that? It really depends on where you decide Sinai is. There's two candidates for Sinai. We don't really need to get into it, but you can see, again, there's the option that if they are living here in Egypt, they could have just gone up the coast, right? To the land. But no, they're being brought. Again, like the idea is, why are we following this madman this way? You know? Why don't we just go up the coast? You know? They don't realize what is actually supposed to be happening here, that God is actually taking them on a spiritual journey, not just a physical one.
Your own understanding.
Yeah, lean not on your own understanding. There you go.
And they're angry with God.
Yeah, right.
Why is God doing this to us?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the cloud is leaving.
Right,
Moses is like,
right. Yes.
but they see the cloud and they're fine. It's like, why is God doing this?
Yeah, yeah.
You'd rather go back there.
Good point. Good point.
One more thing on 14:19. It says, the angel of the Lord who had been traveling in front of Israel's army withdrew and went behind him. The pillar of cloud also moved in front.
Mm.
So it's like the part that maybe they can't see is the angel of the Lord.
Mm.
But then
Sure. Yeah.
What he's given is his manifest presence.
Yeah.
Like following him.
Mm-hmm. That's a good thought.
So I don't know, it's just interesting.
Yeah. Love it. Okay, so let's talk about the sea parting. What does the sea represent? If you guys remember back to early conversations, back all the way in Genesis, what does the sea represent? Life coming out of the sea, sure. But the sea by itself represents the opposite of life. It represents death. Okay? Water represents life, generally, the water of life, right? But no, the sea, the great big body of water, represents that womb that that I was talking about, right? It represents the idea of chaos and disorder out of which the life is able to come when God comes upon it, right? And so, do we have a similar image today in our cosmology as the ancients did in regard to the sea? Is there something that we have today that we think about, that we think of as like a void of non-life? What do we think of? Yeah, okay. Space, yeah, okay, space, right? If you've seen Interstellar or Gravity, or the idea is these movies are about, you could say, battles with the sea. You know what I mean? The idea is these human beings that are contending with realms that are completely hostile to them, realms that are non-life, disorder. Okay, and so if you're an ancient person, you don't have a conception of space, but you do have a conception of, or let's say you don't have a conception of outer space, you do have a conception of that same realm that we think of when we think of space. Okay, so what does it mean for the parting of the seas to happen? Okay, it's almost like God, like, this is how significant this moment is. Okay, for the ancient person, it's like God punched a hole in space. Okay, it's like God made a wormhole for them to pass through. Think about that, okay? That is the gravity of, for lack of a better term, that is the gravity of this moment. The sea represents the one thing that goes all the way back to the beginning that no one has power over. If you're a pagan, even the gods don't have power over the sea necessarily. They were born out of this water. They were born out of these oceans, right? This primordial womb. But for God to have power over the sea, it's the same power that created the world in the first place, okay? If you have authority over the waves, you are the creator. You are empowered, you are most high, you have authority over the strongest thing, which is the realm of death, okay? Anyone thinking about Jesus and the waves yet? Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, we don't have to get there until we get there. But
Oh, can I please?
yeah, I know. But you see, if you're an ancient person, again, like if we encountered something that intentionally punched a hole in space and said, "Come on, humanity!" Like, let's say the Earth was dying, right? Let's say the Earth was actually dying, and you have this being come to you and punch a hole in space and say, "Come through to the other side. I've got a new world for you." That's what's happening here. Okay. Number one, do you trust it? Right. Number two, once you've made it to the other side, all you can do is worship it, right? Because this is the salvation of the entire world. Again, let's say the Earth is dying, a hole has been punched through space. Go through the wormhole to the other side of the universe, and there's a new world for you, right? And then you make it through. That's like if you could do a contemporary version of what it means to pass through the waters. That's what's going on there. Okay? Does that make sense?
Can I read this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mark 1. At that time, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee and was baptized by John the Baptist. As Jesus was coming up out of the water, he saw heaven being torn open.
Yeah. There you go. Haha, that's great. Yeah. No, yeah. I love that you brought that up.
He punched a hole.
Punched a hole in space. I love it. So you guys sort of see what's going on here. How marvelous is this image? This is the central pattern of the Bible, which is the passing through the realm of decay and disorder. That God is leading you through that he's taking you to the other side and granting you a new birth. Okay? That's what's happening to Israel. Again, Noah and the flood is one version of that, the death of the old world. But build this ark, get into the ark, and trust me that I will carry you through the waters to the other side, to the new world. Okay? You see what I'm saying? That's the story of Noah. Huh?
Same as with death, too.
Okay, exactly. That's exactly what the baptism is, okay? So Israel passing through the waters. Trust me, go through. I've punched a hole in space. Go through the wormhole and come out onto the other side to the new planet, to the new world that I have for you, okay? And then the same thing, Jesus, as John the Baptist and as the early church is doing that baptism, it's doing what Jesus did, not just in his baptism, but in his own death and resurrection. He goes down into the underworld and comes back up, bringing everyone with him into a new world. Okay, he dies, the old world dies, the new world resurrects, and he resurrects, bringing up the world with him. Okay, so this is the pattern of the Bible. And again, passing through the waters, you have to think about the resurrection. That's what you have to think about. You have to think about the going into the realm of the dead and coming back out on the other side into a new world. That's that wormhole. You see what I'm saying?
That was another thing in the podcast that I thought was fascinating. He said that John the Baptist told Jesus, "Oh, I shouldn't be baptizing you. You should be baptizing me."
Mhm.
And Jesus says, "No, I must do this to fulfill all righteousness." So
Right.
he had to be baptized
Mhm.
to be the first,
Mhm.
part of the firstborn.
Yeah.
I'm first in this experience.
Right.
You're coming.
We're supposed to go through his story, and so he's modeling that for sure, including the death and the Easter story, which again the Easter story will blend the Passover from last week and this story, right? So it all sort of gets remixed. But if you have been baptized, you have to recognize that that is what the symbol means. Okay, the symbol is the coming to fulfillment of the story of creation, which is the death and the rebirth. Okay, the born from above, or the born againness of you and the creation. Okay, and remember how the language is mirroring Genesis 1 directly. So a wind of God swept over the face of the waters. God made the dome and separated the waters, and the dry land appeared. And then in Exodus chapter 14, the Lord drove back the sea by the wind all night, turned the sea into dry land. The waters were divided, right? So in Genesis chapter 1, they're divided into the waters above and the waters below. And then in Exodus 14, they're divided into the waters on the left and the right. The idea is that, again, as Israel crosses through the sea, as they cross through the waters, They're representatively recapping, or they're doing again what God did at the creation for them personally. We were slaves in Egypt. We were in bondage. We were under the power of sin and death and decay and the Pharaoh, the Satan. But now we have been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, whose blood was painted on our doorposts, that we stood in the judgment. And now that blood has carried us all the way in the pillar of cloud and fire, right? Through the waters. And now we're going to come out to the other side. Okay? Does that make sense? That is the story of the gospel. Okay? That is the good news. That's what Jesus accomplishes and secures in the New Testament. So the people, they completely pass through, right? And Jesus says in John chapter 3, I tell you the solemn truth, unless a person is born of water and wind, water and spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. Okay? So the idea is, I'm not making all this up, okay? Later in the New Testament, Paul will actually say, our ancestors, they were baptized as they passed through the waters. So what I'm saying here is that when you look at the story of the Exodus, like when we watched that movie, The Prince of Egypt, and we get to the parting of the waters scene, I always try to think about not just that event. I try to think of this is a vision, or this is an early shadow of what is resurrection. God is doing the impossible, right? What does it mean for God to resurrect Christ? It means that God is doing what no other entity could ever do. And the reason he could do that is because he is God, because he is most high, because he did this in the first place when he brought order out of disorder, life out of non-life, right? The idea of light coming out of darkness is a logical contradiction unless you're God, who has life to give, who has light to give, okay? And so that is what's going on here. He's parting the waters. He's punching a hole through space. It's like he's remaking the creation again, okay? It's what he did in Genesis 1, but now for the people of Israel, and now they're a nation being born out of these waters, okay? Does that make sense, guys? Cool. Sorry I got ranty there for a second.
Rant on.
Yeah. Well,
That's I kind of pictured that too, like God saved them from death.
yeah, right. He saved them from death by having them pass through the realm that represents death. Okay? So go through death and the dry land will be there for you. Okay? Come onto the other side and be born into a new kingdom, a new creation. Okay? That's what's going on. But they have to go through the realm of the dead to reach the other side. So, does that make sense, guys? So that's why when we baptize, we say, you have died with him, or put to death with Christ, and raised with him. Okay? So you can almost imagine as they go down the slope into the waters and then up the slope out again. Okay? Make sense? Good. So we have a good amount of time. I'm glad that we took more time on this time, since we had no time on this last week anymore, and we're allowed to speak on it a bit more. So let me go ahead and we're going to go to Exodus chapter 15 now, and we're going to read sort of their grand display of worship following this. The song of Miriam and Moses. This is the first song of the Bible. So a lot of people don't know this, and they chuckle when I say it, but the Bible is a musical, okay? It's got lots of songs in it. We've got an entire book of the Bible that is just about hymns, and that is the book of Psalms, of course. But this is the first time that appears, okay? Singing in the Bible and poems, and the idea of, like, let's take the narrative and now let's distill it into this very memorable thing. If you were here for the movie night, they sang this song in that was a musical, and they sang this song in the in that movie. That was the only section that was sung in Hebrew, if you guys remember, as they're being led out of Egypt. So I'm going to not read it here, but I'm going to read it here on the slides, because I have it on the slides. The person who sings the song is said to be Moses and Miriam. They lead. Who's Miriam? His sister, right? So she's one of those many women right at the very beginning of the story. Remember how we talked about at this moment of dire need, women are the ones who are coming and supplying the salvation to the people as they essentially lay all the seeds of what's going to happen in the Exodus. Well, Miriam is one of those people, and she is said to be one of these co-leaders. Michael chapter 6, verse 4, "For I brought you out of Egypt and redeemed you from slavery. I sent Moses, Aaron, and Miriam to help you." So they're sort of the three. We think of Moses as the one, but really it's the three. 3 and 1. Think about that. Okay, I don't know. That was sort of impromptu, but so dumb. So we have Miriam. Miriam, she's said to be a prophet. Okay, so this is an aside, but just a paradigm shift if we're talking about sort of the Bible and its representation of women. Number one, female prophets are most certainly a thing, and female leaders of Israel are most certainly a thing. She won't be the only one in the story of the Bible. She's the sister of Moses and Aaron. She is one directly involved in the process of getting Moses into the house of Pharaoh, which sort of kicked off this entire narrative of the Exodus. And remember how we talked all the way back in that first week on Exodus, how it seemed to be sort of a prophetic, strategic thing that they were putting this Hebrew boy, this Hebrew baby, into the house of Pharaoh, knowing that the Egyptian princess was nice and, things like that, willing to take him in. So she's the singer of the Song of the Sea. And that's what it's called by scholars, the Song of the Sea. It's the song that Israel sang as they came out of the waters. And so let's go ahead and read it. So this is the first 3 verses of the Song of the Sea in Exodus chapter 15. Are you ready? Okay. "I will sing to the Lord, I will sing to Yahweh, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my might. He has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him, my father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a warrior. The Lord is his name." So Yahweh is a warrior. Yahweh is his name. That's just the first three lines or 3 verses. I just want to point this out to you. So again, the idea is in their praise worship, they are pointing to Yahweh, their God, as the one who secured their victory. It's not Moses. It's not them. They're helpless as they stand before the Red Sea, right? They're helpless as they stand as slaves, during the plagues. But in this final sea judgment, remember, it represents the pinnacle or the culmination of all of those signs and wonders. Remember how the signs and wonders, they started with the rod of Moses being turned into a leviathan, into a sea serpent. So it was a sign. It was a signpost pointing forward to what is going to, this is the start and this is the end. The sea serpent is going to get you, right? And what does it say? Moses held his staff over the sea. So remember that it's the staff of judgment, and that sea judgment, the judgment of total death, has come upon the Egyptians, and not just the Egyptians, just the people of the Egyptians, but it's the horse and the rider that speaks to that chariot, those chariot elements. Remember, chariots in the Bible, they represent technology and military might, right? Not just a fighting force, but the idea that this is a great empire. This is a great military fighting force that is very strong, right? The might of imperial industrial authority. And so he has thrown those chariots into the waters, okay? He has done away with them. And then this really important, really significant, doesn't sound significant to begin with, but you really have to meditate on this. Yahweh is a warrior. That concept. Yahweh is a warrior. So Yahweh, the Most High God, wages war, right? What does that mean? What do you think about that? It's been demonstrated right here as the Egyptians have been thrown into the sea as the Israelites passed through, right? I want you to know that as the text continues to carry on this imagery of the Lord as a warrior, as divine warrior, this God warrior, right? Or a warrior who is God. It's going to evolve to such a point that it's going to give you a clarity about what it means for God to be a warrior. And then that comes into clear picture and clear view when it says that the sword of God is his mouth. Okay? The sword of God is his mouth. Why is that?
One's a saving warrior, right?
Uh-huh.
That's what he says. That Well, it's rather using violence, like he would
Mhm.
know a warrior to be.
Mhm.
He uses his words.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the idea is God is not one who needs to go and chop limbs off people, right? When we think of warrior, we think of one who, has a bunch of weapons. What is the weapon of the Lord? The word, right? It's through the word that he creates everything, and it's through the word that he brings judgment upon things, okay? So when you have this Yahweh as warrior language, we don't want to bring it down to base realities and have it be this sense of, I mean, obviously people have their lives lost, but again, the idea here is that God is the one who speaks judgment, right? And so, anyway, it's not so much about the bloodshed in that image as it is about the word that comes from the mouth or the sword that comes from the mouth of God. Okay, cool. So let's go into the next verses, starting at verse 4. So Pharaoh's chariots and his army he cast into the sea. His picked officers sunk in the Red Sea. The floods covered them, and they went down to the depths like a stone. Your right hand, O Yahweh, glorious in power, your right hand, O Yahweh, shattered the enemy. In greatness of your majesty, you overthrew your adversaries. You sent out your fury, it consumed them like stubble. At the blast of your this is a very creative image, guys. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up, the floods stood up in a heap, the deeps congealed in the heart of the sea. Okay, so really, really poetic and symbolic imagery. So the blast of the nostrils of God. What is that imagery? So in the previous chapter it said an east wind came and parted the waters, but then in this chapter it's describing that poetically as the blast from the nostrils, right? And remember, ruach, the Hebrew word for spirit, can also mean breath and wind. So they see this wind that came over the waters that parted them as the breath of God, as though he, like an ox, like gave a big, loud, snuffed out, and that this wind came out and it flooded over the waters and it spread out the waters, and then it says the waters turned into jello, right? The waters turned into jello. So it's describing it. Yeah, well, no, it says they congealed. So, the idea of fat congealing, right? The idea is like you have an oil that can congeal, right? And turn into like a jiggly, jello. And so it becomes gelatinous, right? And that's how they're describing these waters as they pile up. That he stilled the waters in such a way that they become a wall to the right and then on the left as they become gelatinous, right? Again, it's this really, really very unique image and poem. But I think it's really, again, it's helping you to frame in your mind, like, what does it mean? What does this look like? Not that there are literal nostrils in the sky or things like that, but it's giving you these images to like help you think about the feeling of it, the feeling of this. You know what I mean? About God showing up and doing these great works, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and the power of it, right? That's what's cool about Hebrew poetry is it will give you these images and help sort of create a mosaic of images for you to sort of get the feeling of what is being described here, spiritually speaking. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My desire shall have its fill of them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall be on them. You blew with your wind, again, can translate to spirit or breath. You blew with your wind, the sea covered them, they sank like lead in the mighty waters. So while Israel passed through, the enemy sank like lead, okay? Remember, this is the same thing as the Passover. One house has the blood of the lamb painted on it, one doesn't, and the angel of death comes over both of them, but one is protected and one is destroyed, okay? It's the same thing. Who is able to stand in the judgment? John in Revelation says, and then I looked, and it was they who washed their robes in the blood of the lamb. They stood in the judgment, and they say, glory belongs to our God and King, that sort of thing. So, okay, verse 11 now. We're going to finish it. Who is like you, O Yahweh, amongst the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in splendor, doing wonders? So that speaks to those signs and those plagues that we talked about last week. That God in his signs and in his wonders and his plagues, he's bringing judgment upon the gods of Egypt. There's no one like There's no one among Egypt that is like this one who has destroyed them all, right? Who's brought down the house, who threw down the gods of Egypt and now thrown the horse and rider into the sea. You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. In your steadfast love, you led the people you redeemed. You guided them by your strength to your holy abode. So that's probably the number one passage that you need to, or lines that you need to remember from the song. In your steadfast or loyal love, right? That this is, who said it? Was it you that brought up loyal love, or was that someone else? The idea that God is going to be described in a number of different ways in the book of Exodus, but number one, he's going to be described as having steadfast or loyal love, meaning love that lasts through the ages, love that lasts through the generations, that doesn't grow weary, it doesn't grow old, right? It's a steadfast love that you lead the people whom you redeemed. What does redeem mean? Anyone? I've already said it today, but someone repeat it back to me.
Someone pays a price for you.
Yeah. A price is paid, right? A price is paid. So you redeemed us through your love. In your steadfast love, you led the people you redeemed, and you guided them by your strength to your holy abode. What's an abode? Home. Great. So you are leading your people to where you dwell, okay? To your dwelling place, to where you live, okay? The peoples they heard, they trembled, pangs seized the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom were dismayed, trembling seized the leaders of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan melted away. So this event is not just an event that is just sort of happening underground, like the idea of it, no one really knowing about it. The idea here is that this is a worldwide recognized event, right? That this is a moment at which you're like, oh my gosh, those slaves in Egypt got brought out and Egypt was thrown down by what? What's going to happen? Okay. Terror and dread fell upon them. By the might of your arm, they became still as a stone until your people, O Lord, passed by, until the people whom you acquired passed by. You brought them in. So this is interesting because now we're talking future tense, okay? So you can either say, if this is being sung at this time in the story, then they're being prophetic, speaking in the future, from the future tense, right? Essentially, or this is an interpolation from later writers that have improved upon the song over time. But regardless, you brought them in and planted them on the mountain of your own possession. So that cosmic mountain imagery going all the way back to the Garden of Eden. So they're obviously looking forward not just to Mount Sinai, but to Mount Zion, right? In Jerusalem, where they're going to live as that being the capital in perpetuity, right? So the place, O Lord, you made for your abode. Obviously the temple is right there on Mount Zion. The sanctuary, O Lord, that your hands have established. Yahweh, you will reign forever and ever. And so that is the first song of the Bible. And speaking to all of these things that we've talked about how the parting of the waters represents the baptism, the going into death, the Passover lamb represents the crucifixion, and then the waters, and then even coming into the promised land, and being settled on the holy mountain, settled on the abode, the cosmic mountain. That is an image of the return to the garden. Okay, so in this song, you have representatively, thematically, the story of Scripture. You have the story of God redeeming his people from the realm of the dead, from slavery, letting them pass through as he leads them by the pillar of cloud and fire, right? And setting them on the mountain where he dwells. Okay, good. It's a great passage. So you can go read that in more detail and meditate on that and pray through that. It's a great passage, just like I said, because it's the first hymn of the Bible.
Who wrote this song? Mariah?
So it says that Miriam sang this song, and Moses sang this song, conceivably. Yeah. This is the first time that we even have a situation like that where the text is describing Israel creating material to help carry on the narrative and carry on the story, that they would remember it forever, right? We're going to remember how we talked about that like in the first week, I think, about like how this is like the first example of that, of like something happens and now we're going to create something that is helping us to remember forever what happened here, right? What we experienced, and we're going to have this song as a monument to that, right?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You know that we talked about the angel of the Lord. We talked about Jesus, the pre-incarnate Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When it talks about brass and it talks about wind and it talks, you know, were they thinking spirit of God like in Genesis?
I would say so. Yeah.
So the Spirit of God continues to be referenced, and they would have taken it that way.
I would say so, just because again, in your modern context, your translator will translate it wind or breath or whatever, but it means, I mean, like, I think in this translation it says in Genesis 1, whereas the ESV or something will say, the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. I think the NRSV says the wind of God was hovering over the waters, right? And so the idea here is the breath or the wind that comes from God directly is the Spirit of God, right? And so that's the Holy Spirit.
We
Yeah.
Trinitarians tend to separate the persons.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at this, and the Lord our God is one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They don't necessarily separate.
Well, it's you don't want to. Well, it depends on what you mean by separate. It depends. Yeah.
They're seeing him as one God, but
one God. Yeah, absolutely. Well, in the New Testament, that's true too. It's not three gods; it's one God.
No, but I'm just saying they're not looking at different persons necessarily here, right?
Well, that's complicated. Okay. Yeah. So the language of persons, I would say that comes from the New Testament, and there might be times in which you could definitely say that sort of language is being used in the Old Testament as well. But the idea, yeah, there's so many things that I could say now about that, So
I don't want to.
I'll find a week to where we can get just 100%, just to have the whole 2 hours talking about the Trinity. I think that would be helpful. I'll find a week that we can do that.
Things like prophecy, you mentioned prophecy. I mean, Moses was a prophet.
Yeah.
Miriam's a prophet. It's like, and she's referred to as a prophetess. So, I'm looking at this, I'm going, when God is near, what happens?
Yeah. Yeah.
People prophesy. People have the,
that's what's going to happen in.
Paul says we have the mind of Christ.
Yeah.
They are influenced by God Himself.
Yeah.
And then things come out.
Yeah. So far, just as far as we've read, you have invisible God, who is in, the Father, right? Invisible God whom highest heaven does not contain. We haven't read that verse yet, but the creator of all things, right? You have the visible iteration of that, right? You have the God who appears and people say, "Oh my gosh, I've seen God and I've lived," right? The God who speaks, the angel of the Lord, right? And then you have the wind or Spirit of God that appears and does these great miraculous acts. We've seen sort of these multiple things, yeah. But we'll have a whole meeting on the Trinity, guys. We'll need to do that. That's as far as we've gotten here. I'm saying that's it. We've gotten that far enough, and they're all Yahweh, right? So it's the Spirit of Yahweh. It's the angel of Yahweh. It's Yahweh in heaven, the Most High God. Things like that. So
it's just the Western educated man when you don't want to know.
Right. There's a lot to be said. There's a lot of, it gets real deep the Trinity is probably the deepest thing you could talk about. So, okay, here we go. So this begins a pattern, what is called by scholars the pattern of the Exodus, or the Exodus way, of being brought out, the way out, right? We had a video on this, the way through, and then the way in, okay? The way out, the way through, the way in, because now that they have been passed through the waters, is this great moment, but now, like Jesus after his baptism, they are led into the desert where we've already talking about the complaining that happens time and time and time again. Israel thinks we are being led out here to die, right? Part of me thinks, yes, you are being led out here to die to yourself, right? And you're being led out here to understand what it means to rely on God totally. But the way out and the way through the desert, and then the way into the garden, the way into the promised land, the way in. So you have to pass through the desert and pass through the trials and pass through the time of testing, and then you enter into the promised land. That's why the wilderness represents the time that we all exist in now, okay? Right. We have been redeemed from slavery. We've passed through the waters. The blood of the Lamb covered our doorposts, right? But now we walk and wander in the wilderness through times of testing, waiting for the moment in which we are brought into the new heavens and the new earth, brought into the new creation, which is the second coming. Okay, does that make sense, guys? So that's sort of another way of thinking about it is you're still living as the people of God, but you're living in exile. This is Daniel, and not that Daniel, but the book of Daniel, and Ezekiel. How are we, and Jeremiah, how are we to live as we live in the land of Babylon? So these elements, okay, they're brought into the wilderness. God led Israel out of slavery in Egypt and through the waters of the Red Sea, but that did not mean that their struggles were immediately over. They were led into the wilderness, a realm of chaos and lifelessness. The Midbar, which is the Hebrew word, is a dangerous place to be where humanity is not meant to live. Why did God lead them there? Why did he lead them there? Yeah. So a number of different things, but what you just said, to test them, is probably the primary thing that we could say is the point of these wilderness. Go ahead.
You say, probably other people have heard this as well. It's like God, God got them out of Egypt, but he had to get Egypt out of them.
Okay, I love that way of thinking about it. Yeah, that's good. I've heard that before too, and I love that. God got them out of Egypt, but now the wilderness is God getting Egypt out of them. And yes, that the idea is these times of testing, they bring about a sanctification. That if God, or excuse me, if the people of Israel would allow God to change them in these experiences, then they would be made into the people who are ready to enter into the promised land. Okay. And that's why it's going to take an entire death and coming up of a new generation, a generation that was brought up in the wilderness itself, to be the kind of people who are prepared to go and kill all those giants who are in the promised land, okay? And make a life for themselves in the promised land, that they're going to bring the day of the Lord on this promised land now, and they're going to be able to live in the land as a righteous generation, okay? But the people who came out of Egypt, they're going to constantly, again, just try to empathize with them for a second. You're being led out into the Mojave Desert. Do you turn around? Right? There's nothing out there. And so what's going to be significant and really important for you to recognize are these stories in which God miraculously provides manna, the water from the rock, these different moments where it's like, oh my gosh, we are going to die. And then God shows up, okay? In ways that you can't explain, okay? These miracle moments, remember I said what makes a miracle is not just simply that it's inexplicable, it's that there's meaning behind it too. And so in the remaining moments that we have left, the next 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, let's get through these stories. We're going to get through 3 wilderness stories, okay? So let's try to spend 10 minutes on each, okay? All right, here we go. Exodus chapter 16. The whole congregation of the Israelites set out from Elim, and Israel came to the wilderness of Sin. That is not this English word for sin. That's just, don't get confused. The wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month after they departed from the land of Egypt. The whole congregation of the Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and ate our fill of bread." Flesh pots, this is an interesting translation. Pots of meat, like pots of stew. You could say stew pots, okay? And ate our fill of bread. So they say, we had meat and bread back in Egypt. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. So they're saying, back in Egypt, yeah, we were slaves, but we had meat and we had bread. Okay? Now we're out here in the wilderness and we're going to die. Then Yahweh said to Moses, I am going to rain bread from heaven for you, and each day the people shall go out and gather enough for that day. In that way I will test them, whether they will follow my instruction or not. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they will bring in, it will be twice as much as what they gather on the other days. So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, in the evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, Yahweh, that brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of Yahweh, because he has heard your complaining against Yahweh. For what are we that you complain against us? And Moses said, when Yahweh gives you meat to eat in the evening and your fill of bread in the morning, because Yahweh has heard your complaining and that you utter against him, what are we? Your complaining is not against us, but against Yahweh. So he's saying essentially, you're coming to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam Moses is saying, you're coming to me, Aaron, and Miriam with this complaining, but we are prophets of God, and you're complaining against God, who is the one who will provide for you. Okay. Then Moses said to Aaron, say to the whole congregation of the Israelites, draw near to Yahweh, for he has heard your complaining. And as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the Israelites, they looked toward the wilderness, and the glory of Yahweh appeared in the cloud. The Lord spoke to Moses and said, I have heard the complaining of the Israelites. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall have your fill of bread. Then you shall know that I am Yahweh your God. In the evening, quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a fine, flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, what is it? For they did not know what it was. Let me hit this little note here. They said, what is it? Or is it manna? Manna means, what is it? Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, it is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what Yahweh has commanded. Gather as much of it as each of you needs, an omer to a person according to the number of persons, all providing for those in their own tents. The Israelites did so, some gathering more, some gathering less. But when they measured it all with an omer, those who gathered much had nothing over, and those who gathered little had no shortage. So that's interesting. They gathered as much as each of them needed. So when they go out to gather this provision of God, it's only as much as they need. No more, no less. And Moses said to them, let no one leave any of it over until morning. But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and became foul. So it rots overnight. So you can't save any for the next day. You go and you gather just enough for that day. Okay? Anyone thinking of the Lord's Prayer yet? The daily bread, yeah. Okay. Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning they gathered as much as they needed, but when the sun grew hot, it melted. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much food, 2 omers apiece, per the Lord's command. And when the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, this is what Yahweh has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil, and all that is left over put aside to be kept until morning. So they put it aside till morning, as Moses commanded them, and it did not become foul, and there were no worms in it. Moses said, eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none. On the 7th day, some of the people went out to gather, and they found none. Yahweh said to Moses, how long will you refuse, Yahweh said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and instructions? See, Yahweh has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the 6th day, he gives you food for 2 days. Each of you stay where you are. Do not leave your place on the 7th day. So the people rested on the 7th day. The house of Israel called it, what is it? It was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Moses said, this is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer be kept of it throughout your generations, in order that they may see the food which I fed it to you in the wilderness. So think about that for a second. He said, you shall have a heirloom of this that will last through the generations, that you'll be able to pass on to the generations, and they will be able to see the food with which I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Egypt. And Moses said to Aaron, take a jar and put an omer of manna in it and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations. So they saved it. perpetually, okay? All right, so this is the manna story. Let's get back into the slides. So manna, what is it? The word is ascribed to the substance given to Israel as food in the wilderness following the exodus from Egypt, a mysterious heavenly provision of nourishment, which is called the food of angels later on in Scripture, okay? What are we to derive from this story?
It seems like God was providing daily, even, and they were still doubting it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hindsight, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Silly.
Mm-hmm. I feel that way all the time about my own life, though. I'll just say that. Oh, man. Yeah. I got through this day, but am I going to get through tomorrow? Right? So there's that. But yeah, so the idea here is that, there's the question, what's the manna? What is it really? And the point is you're not supposed to know it. Okay? It means what is it? And it's trying to tell you that it's something very special, okay? Come on, bring it guys. Let's hear more.
I've always known manna as like life force energy.
Okay.
Which is like, can't describe that.
Okay? So the idea is that God is providing his own very life in the bread. It's a good way of thinking about it. Especially what does Jesus say about himself? I am the bread that comes from heaven. Yeah. I am the bread of life. I'm the bread that comes from heaven. Okay. Good.
What if they're allergic to gluten?
There we go. So what is the point of the Sabbath? This is the institution of the Sabbath in the story. We haven't had that yet. We had the 7-day Sabbath cycle appear in the creation narrative, but it hasn't been brought up again. That idea of 7 days and the seventh day is a rest. We haven't had that here yet. So why is it, what is this, now that we're in the wilderness, what is the point of that now that we have the Sabbath being instituted? Anyone?
Just what you said, right? Like on the seventh day, God rested.
Mm-hmm.
But he provided
Mm-hmm.
God has a
enough
people
for
now.
him.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Says this is how it's going to be between us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so let me give you sort of a summary of this, and then we'll go back over some slides. We'll go through the 7-day creation narrative slides from the past as well. So humanity is not meant for endless productivity, but instead what makes something perfect is an excess of time plus the cessation of work. In the command to Sabbath, creatures are taught to stop their striving and put their trust in the Creator as the provider of all things. Don't go out on the Sabbath. God has provided for you each day, and he provided for you even on this day in which you are not working. Now, there's a part of this story that might have been overlooked by you, but it also connects directly, not just the 7 days, but it also connects directly to the creation narrative. So in the evening is quail, and in the morning is manna. Okay? Do we have evening and morning appear in the creation narrative? There was evening and there was morning the first day, right? Okay, so the way I see it is you have consecutively in the creation narrative, it's like God is providing evening and morning, creation. God is providing evening and morning, creation day 2. God is providing evening and morning, creation day 3. And it's the same thing as they're now in the wilderness, as they now pass through the waters of the old, life. They've passed through the waters, and now you're going through a 7-day creation narrative where God is providing evening and morning, evening and morning, evening and morning. So that's why I see the Hebrew writer is connecting those two passages, evening and morning in Genesis 1, evening and morning in Exodus 16. Okay, let's go through the meaning of 7 all the way back in Genesis chapter 1. Remember, 7 means completion. It means coming to the end of something. It means coming to the perfection of something, right? Remember how we just looked at numerology for a second, how 3 gives a uniformity, right? 3 and 3. But then if I add 1 and have 7, now there's no uniformity, right? Now I have an excess, right? Uniformity, excess. So the idea is day 1, day 2, day 3, God has provided day 1, day 2, day 3, and you've worked to go gather all of that, day 1, day 2, day 3. 4, 5, and 6, same thing. And then there's an excess. There's a lingering. What goes on the 7th day? That is what is the completion. A system that includes that which is extra, set apart, and special is a system that is truly perfect. It makes room for rest, for celebration, and for trust. So the idea here is I'm giving you what you need day in and day out, and you're working at it. But now here's an extra test. On this day, don't even work at all, and you're still going to have what you need. I'm still going to give it to you. This is going back into I'm going to skip over these a lot. Actually, I'm going to skip over quite a few of these. Remember, Shabbat or Sabbath means cessation, okay? Rest. So linked to the Hebrew word for 7, shavi, the Hebrew word for rest or cessation, implies a settling or fulfilling the point of work. To Shabbat is to reach a climax, to achieve completion, to enter into a state of wholeness, to arrive at the end goal that work has been purposed towards. So when we enter into the 7th day rest, when the Israelites are collecting the manna provision day in, day out, the ultimate point is that they would rest in the provision of God. Okay? The idea is that the striving to grab the quail and the manna has supplied them everything that they need for a day, and then more so on the day, even when they don't do anything at all. They don't work on the 7th day, but it's still being provided. Okay? That is the true miraculousness of what is being provided in this manna story. That he's telling you day in, day out, I'm going to provide for you, even when I tell you to stop gathering. There will still be enough for you. Okay? When I tell you to, it's like when I tell you to work, you work. When I tell you to rest, you rest. And don't try to work when I tell you to rest, because then you're not trusting me. Okay? Remember, shalom or Sabbath or rest. The Hebrew word for peace is the end point of creation. Also tied to the number of 7 is the concept of shalom, which is God's ultimate goal for his creation. Shalom is best understood as meaning something like peace, but this peace does not mean inactivity. It means flourishing, harmony, prosperity, which is the final destiny of all of creation, right? And so that 7th day rest represents the coming into the fullness of what God has been providing day in and day out. And now we come finally to the moment where we don't even need to go out and gather. It's just been given to us. Does that make sense?
Remind you of the creation when God rested on the 7th.
Yeah. So God, exactly, resting on the 7th day. The resting is God settling into his throne. That's the image that is being presented there, right? Is that God is taking up residence within his creation. And that's what we see here. So Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 2 through 10 actually tells you what the manna story is all about. So we're going to go ahead and read that. And then we'll be done very soon, guys. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 2 through 10. Remember the long way that Yahweh your God has led you these 40 years. So this is later on, of course. These 40 years in the wilderness in order to humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commandments. He humbled you by letting you hunger, then by feeding you with manna, with which neither you nor your ancestors were acquainted, in order to make you understand that one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh. Okay? This is what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 4, verse 4, as Satan is tempting him to turn stones into bread. And he says, man does not live by bread, but by every word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh. And I will tell you, if you've ever dealt, this is my opinion, if you've ever dealt with a sense in which I need this thing in order to be okay. I need this thing in order to be all right. I'm going to die without this thing. That's a great verse to have on a little index card.
Yes.
Okay? Put it in your wallet. Man does not live by bread alone. Okay? But by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. The clothes on your back did not wear out, and your feet did not swell these 40 years. Know that in your heart, as a parent disciplines a child, so the Lord your God disciplines you. So he's saying a parent disciplines his child or her child because out of the parent's great love for their child. And that is God's disposition towards his people, right? For Yahweh your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with flowing streams, with springs and underground waters welling up into the valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees, of pomegranates and of olive trees and honey. This is going to be an abundant land. But the goal is that you would learn to rely on me, not just the things that I give you, but rely on me alone directly. Okay? And that's what the point of the wilderness is you learn to rely on God, not just on the excess goods that he gives you. Okay? Once you rely on the excess goods that he gives you, that is when it becomes idolatry. Okay? You start worshiping the things that God has gifted you, not the one who gifted them. And so he's saying, I'm going to bring you into an abundant land, but I want you to know what it means to rely on my word alone first. A diet strictly of my word for 40 years, then you will have the abundance of the promised land, the abundance of, because what did Adam and Eve do? They had a garden full of abundance, and still yet they took that which did not belong to them. They did not listen to the word. They did not rely on the word. They took the thing that was said not to take. And so he's saying, I'm leading a generation of people in the opposite setting, that they would learn to have a diet strictly of my word, the manna, and then they will receive all those good things once they have come to the realization that they do not live off of bread alone. Okay? Were you going to say something?
I almost not envy them, but like we have so many distractions right now, and so many things are like in our face, and just so many distractions, and I almost like think like that's like a really like awesome way to live.
You are describing why people are monks. Okay? That is the reason monasteries exist. And you're describing the reason why fasting is a very, very important spiritual discipline. So,
Right. I was just talking to I don't know if you know who John is, but I was just talking to him about like fasting and how like when you fast and you fast for a long period of time, it takes your attention away to like all these earthly things and only on like food and like not just on food, but like that's like what you're the only thing you're worried about that kind of moment.
Yeah. And you can say it's good to envy them. What I said before is the prophet, like every prophet of God is called out into the wilderness at one point for that very reason. The idea is that if you want to be a warrior, if you want to be a spiritual warrior, you have to learn what it means to be in the wilderness. Okay? And not just rely on the earthly goods, all these material things. It's scary. But that is the call for sure, is to, there's in church history, there's a whole group of people that we call the desert fathers and mothers, right? And there's a whole tradition of their writings, which you can go read, and stories and stuff about, like St. Anthony the Great, for example, who lived his entire life out, in isolation in the wilderness, for example. I'm not saying everyone's called to do that. I'm just saying that what your impulse just was now, it's not a new impulse. Yeah. So anyway, makes sense, guys? Okay, we have like 5 minutes. Can we read 2 stories? Okay, 2 stories in chapter 17. Okay. So they're continuing in the wilderness on their way to Sinai. From the wilderness of Sin, the whole congregation of the Israelites journeyed by stages as Yahweh commanded. They camped in Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. The people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test Yahweh?" But the people thirsted there for water, and the people complained against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to Yahweh, "What shall I do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." Yahweh said to Moses, "Go ahead of the people and take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will be standing there in front of you on the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it, so that the people may drink." Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. He called the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled and tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Very simple story. Anyone? Just a few verses, quick little story. There's going to be a lot of little stories like this in the wilderness. They're very mysterious stories, but they have a lot of meaning to them. Okay, I'm going to read the next one, and then I'll do the slides, and we'll be done. Then Amalek, or the Amalekites, came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. So not only are they starving and, dying of thirst, apparently, but now they have enemies coming to attack them and ambush them, okay? Moses said to Joshua, choose some men for us and go out, fight with Amalek. Joshua is mentioned for the first time here. Incredibly important figure of the Bible. So just take note of that. Choose some men for us and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek. While Moses, Aaron, and Hur, who's Hur? I don't know, went up to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed, and when he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side, so his hands were steady until the sun set. And Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the sword. Then Yahweh said to Moses, write this as a reminder in a book and recite it in the hearing of Joshua. We'll just stop there, and I will just get through the next couple slides. I can't go over these slides, so go and look at them. Yeah, sorry. So did you notice any repetitive elements of those two stories that we just read, the short stories? Like what in these two stories was consistent between both of them?
The staff.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, good. Okay, what is this staff? Remember, it represents the staff of judgment that turns into a leviathan when it's cast onto the ground, okay? A tanin, a serpent, a sea serpent. So in story number 1, they're complaining there's no water. God says, go up to the rock. I will stand there on the rock, and you strike the rock, and the water will flow. Strike it with your staff that you use to render judgment upon Egypt. Strike it where I will be standing at the rock, and the water will gush. Okay? Someone say it. I heard.
Is the staff of judgment.
Uh-huh.
Strikes the rock.
Uh-huh. Where God is standing.
Where God is standing, and living water, of course.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Good. So, the staff of judgment strikes God, who is the rock, and the water. What happens when Jesus is stabbed on the cross? The water, blood and water bursts forth, right? Okay, good. So, second story, the battle with the Amalekites. The Amalekites ambushed the people of Israel near Mount Sinai, so they're very close to the mountain where they're going to meet God, right? Near Mount Sinai, and attempt to exterminate Israel completely. Moses, trusting in God's power, resolves to hold high the staff of judgment for the duration of the battle. Hold high the staff of judgment. Yet Moses is only able to do so through the help of his brother Aaron on one side, and Hur, a man from the tribe of Judah, on his right side. The battle is won as these three hold the staff high for all to see. Okay? So Moses, huh?
So number 3 again.
Okay, there's the 3, yeah. Moses is holding the staff of judgment high as a sign. As long as he's holding the staff, then the battle is being won. When the Son of Man is lifted up above the earth. Yeah, okay. Good. The staff of judgment, we have already come to describe as representing the cross. So the staff of judgment represents the cross that strikes the rock, brings judgment upon Egypt and things like that. Okay, good. So the staff is being held up. Who is Moses? A prophet. Who is Aaron? The priest of Israel. And who is Hur? A man from the tribe of Judah, which is the kingly tribe. Prophet, priest, and king. Okay? Holding up the judgment staff of God, the judgment rod of God, which allows Israel to win the battle. Okay? Just little amazing typologies, short stories that clue you in to different meanings or different symbols, different themes as to what the cross represents. All the way back in Exodus as they're led through the wilderness. So in that way, you can say Christ is our rock that bursts water forth as it's being struck. Or Christ is, we're fighting our battles, and Christ is Moses, Aaron, and Hur holding the staff up as our sign that we look at, and it allows us to win the battle. I'm not the one who made this up. 1 Corinthians 10, verses 1 through 4. I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that our ancestors were all under the cloud and passed through the sea and were all baptized into Moses. There's that baptism. Baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and they all ate the same spiritual food, the manna. They all drank the same spiritual drink from the rock, which was Christ. The same spiritual food, the bread that comes from heaven, Jesus the Messiah. Remember, Christ just means Messiah. It's the Greek. And they drank from the spiritual rock that followed him. The rock was Christ. Okay, so Christ is that provision, that manna that is being provided again and again and again and again and again. He's the cloud by day, the fire by night. That sort of wraps up the entire meeting. Does that feel good, guys? When you're in the application time, we are all in the wilderness by one measure or another. And whenever you find yourself in the wilderness, you do not live by bread alone. You live by the bread that comes from heaven, okay? Meditate and pray on that this week. And we'll meet next time when we get to the Sinai moment, Sinai theophany, the giving of the law at Sinai, the building of the tabernacle. It's going to be good. We only have 3 weeks left in the Torah, okay? The first 5 books of the Bible. Then Joshua. Remember, we're going to bring all that 7 species of food. It's going to be fun. I'm going to have a guest speaker. It's going to be good. We're going to talk about the land of Israel as we get into Joshua. And we're flying through the Bible now, guys. Cool? All right. Thank you, guys. All right.